So hey there fellow YouTubers, Frank Bush here again. So in today's video I'm going to be doing a bit of Ropecraft stuff, and I want to show you guys binding rods. So I'm going to do the first video off. I plan on doing probably a couple videos in regards to this kind of technology, but in the first video I'm going to show just how I make them, and then in the next couple videos I'll probably show some examples of how versatile these can be used when you're out in the field. Yeah, so if you're interested in kind of advancing your Ropecraft abilities, then stay tuned. So as you can see, there's not a lot of equipment, and that's the whole point of these things for when you're out in the field. Yeah, all I've got is some paracord, 550 paracord, and I've just got a little eye loop that I put into the end. It's kind of standard fare you'd have in your bag if you were out bushcraft and that kind of stuff. Now this one's about 20-25 foot long or so. It's not an exact measurement thing we're doing in this video. And then I've just got the stick here that we're going to use for the example. So I'll shift camera angles and we'll just get right into walking through the stages of how to kind of whip together one of these binding rods. Yeah, so to get this started is pretty elementary really. I've just moved the stick down, so I've got one end down towards me. Yeah, and I've got my hank of rope. And like I say, I've just got that little eye on there that I tied off, and I'm just going to pull a bit of that out so I have a bit spare. I can leave the better part of the hank sitting there. And I'm going to take this now. I'm just going to put a bend in the line as such. And now I'm just going to turn around and I'm going to want to hook this onto this stick. Yeah, so in order to do that, I'm just going to kind of put my fingers into the insides, roll it, and just kind of fold it onto itself so it's as such. Here, I'll move that out of the way. So it's as such, and then I'm just going to kind of turn it into itself, and that becomes like a little lark's head. And I'm going to take that now and just hook that onto the end of the stick, yeah? And because there's the knot on that loop, as I pull, I want to just kind of slide that knot up. And what ends up happening is that knot will just lock this little loop right up. And the more I pull and kind of wiggle this now, the more this knot wants to pull and sit tight up against the backside of the lark's head, and it just kind of locks in place. And the more you kind of crank it and pivot it, the more it just kind of hooks on there. So it's a really easy way to kind of get things started. And it's on extremely tight, like that's not really going anywhere. I can pull tension here and you can see that's locked on pretty solid, yeah? So I'll shift camera angles now and we'll move on, and like I say, this will be kind of our starting point now. This is our first loop in the line. So now I'm going to start walking down the line and I'm going to use the same knot. So I'll shift camera angles and I'll come in really close for this one and show you exactly what I'm doing as I want to build out these binding rods. But it's a fairly straightforward process. There's not a lot to it. So like I say, let me just shift camera angles, I'll cut back and we'll move on. Yeah. So I'll just kind of slide my hank over to the inside so it's just easier to have access to. So now I'm going to take that line of cordage that we have though, and I'm going to pick the distance I want for the next loop to sit. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a loop in the line, and I want it to be a half decent size, about the size of my fist, maybe a bit smaller. And I'm going to set that onto the rod itself, yeah, as such, nothing to it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, I'm going to wrap it around, and I want to go fully around the cordage itself now, so that it comes fully around. And now this end bit I want to just tuck in between the cordage and the rod. And now that gives me another little loop, and I'm just going to slide this away now from this end. I'm just going to slide that away to give it a bit of tension. And I'm going to start to pull on this side and kind of wiggle it down until those two lines become right side by each with each other. And now I've got a second loop in this line, and it's just that simple now. That loop isn't going anywhere. I can pull it this way and it's locked on pretty solid. And like I say, I want to kind of just apply tension, get everything nice and firm. But now I've got this kind of locked loop, and what I can do now is I'm just going to take the rod and I'm going to spin it, and holding that loop in my hand so that the rod kind of has the cordage wrapping around it down the rod as it goes. And now I line up my two loops so that they're sitting, on the same direction of line, if you will. And you don't have to, all this is optional. And then I'm going to carry on walking down now with my cordage a little further to I get to the point where I want that next loop to be. And I'm going to do the exact same thing now again, where I'm just putting a loop in that line. Like I say, about the size of my fist, maybe a little smaller, you know, maybe a little bigger. This is really to your discretion of how big you want these loops to be. Will depend on how big you want the starting loop to be. The bigger the starting loop, the bigger these loops will be, yeah? And we're doing the exact same thing again. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to bring it around right over top of the two lines of the cordage, and then I'm going to feed it through that opening again and then pull it down, and it just locks that in place. And over again we're able to do this as we walk down the rod, and it gives us our binding rod. And what I mean by the binding rod is we now have multiple points now all along this rod where we can bind our cordage to this. You know, very similar to in my modular Ropecraft systems. I use a lot of loops and knots and those types of things. We're creating a similar kind of structure where I have multiple loops now that I can bind into all the way down the rod. And because of the nature of, I'm just going to give that a twist and get it. I always like to have it wrapped around a bit because it keeps everything nice and tight, yeah? Just as a kind of, it uses a little bit of extra cordage. It's not critical, but this stuff is a very flexible design in that regard. And I'll just come back to this second knot now and just show you that I can pull as hard as I want. That's locked, it's not going anywhere. So it's a good binding point that I've created, and hence why I call them binding rods. So it allows me now to just keep walking down, and I'll shift camera angles and I'll come in close because I don't know if the camera's getting the best angle of this, but these are like locked in place very easily now, and I can kind of roll them on this rod and line them up with each other with ease so that they're all kind of the same, sitting on the same line on the rod, if you will, the same direction of pointing outward, yeah? But like I say, I'll shift camera angles and I'll come in and see if I can get a better angle on exactly what I'm doing with this knot. So like I say, I'm trying to get in kind of as close as I can. And now I want to keep wrapping. If I'm wrapping the cordage on this rod, if I've decided to wrap it, you know, counterclockwise, I want to keep going counterclockwise all the way down the rod to keep the tension on the line, yeah? And I just find it helps keep these things in place as you move through time, yeah? But I'm going to walk down a little further, and after wrapping it around once or twice now, just kind of holding that with my thumb, take a bit more slack out of the hank, and now all I'm doing is, like I say, it's really elementary. I'm just putting it, I'll just kind of hold that there, I'm just putting a loop in that line. You know, nothing fancy. It really doesn't matter which way the loop is, underhand or overhand or any of that business. That's all kind of a moot point. It's more just wanting to get the distancing between them to be relatively equal within my mind. And if I see that this loop's a little small, I can make it bigger, or I can just pull back here and it'll make it smaller. You know, it's all adjustable, really easy. And then, like I say, I'm just wrapping the loop now. I'm just wrapping it underneath. I'm coming right over top of the two cords that are here that I was kind of holding together. I'm coming right over top of those, and then I'm going to pull them out a bit and stick the end through as such. And that kind of locks things in place, where I'll even keep my finger in there to make sure my loop doesn't contract at all while I'm applying the tension. And I want to pull down on the rod. I want to pull down on this loop this way, away from where I started at first, and then I pull on the line to kind of tighten it all up as I go. And you can see that there's not much to it. Even if I get a bit of space on this side, it doesn't matter. This loop is already locked. It's not going anywhere. It's on there good and solid. I just like dressing it up to have it, you know, look nice and everything else, but it's not a showstopper for having it all function the way you want it to, yeah? And then, like I say, all I do now, I look at where my lines were sitting for my last loops and kind of either roll it forward a bit, which creates more tension, and lock it in, or I can roll it the other way, but I prefer to kind of add more tension to the rod as I go. So I'm just going to repeat this process and walk right down to the end of the line, and then I'll stop and kind of show you what that looks like when it's fully, when we've got full sets of these. Yeah, so I'll just, like I say, I'll talk through this at this camera angle one more time. I'm coming down, I'm just putting a loop in the line, doesn't matter, overhand, underhand, does not matter. I'm wrapping it around, I'm coming over top of the two, kind of pulling them open with my fingers and then stuffing the loop through, and that's it. And we're going to keep doing that over and over again, like I say, all the way down the length of the line. I pull this back a bit, allows me to apply the tension and set things nice and snug. I can see that my line is straight here. I could leave it there, it's not critical. If you want to whip these together really quick, you can leave them, but I just like having it where I like putting that extra turn into it. It just keeps everything snug and keeps it from shifting and moving for these eyes rolling on the rod, if you will. It minimizes that as you're going through time, yeah? And I just like, so I just make that a habit of doing this extra twist around the rod. Like I say, I'll cut cameras now. I'll come back when I'm close to the end and I'll show you how I kind of finish these off so that they're permanently bound to this rod, yeah? So hopefully you can see that now. Let's say 2 or 3 minutes later, and I now have these kind of loops that are attached, and I've got them all the way up. We're getting close to the end of the rod now, yeah? So now I'm going to come into this end and just show you how I lash this all on. And like I say, we're only using 20-25 feet of rope here, yeah? So we've managed to achieve building out these binding rods with really minimal materials. In this example, I'm using a piece of bamboo just because I had it kicking around the house, but this could be applied to any, you know, log or stick or anything like that. It's pretty universal in that regards. If you're wanting to do it more for structural stuff, you'd want to go with the larger diameter. It's going to chew through a bit more cord than, you know, smaller stuff like this. You know, it goes through fairly small amounts of cord, right? So like I say, I'll stop rambling and I'll show you how to kind of lock in this side so that everything's permanently on this rod. So I'll just quickly show it from a different angle to show you. I tried to get it to be as uniform as I can with these eyelets all the way down the rod, yeah? That's one of the main things you want to do, is try to have continuity as you go, just for later on when you're wanting to use this for other more advanced things, yeah? Okay, so I'm just kind of flip things around now, so my rods, you know, all the lines are going, the eyelets are going down that way. And we'll come up to this end of the rod now. And I'm left with, out of the 20-25 foot of cordage we started with, you can see I've got a few feet left, yeah? And what I do now to kind of bind this up, if I wanted to use this for more longer term, I come down near the end of this pole and I want to be a little bit up from the end. I want to just put a bend in the line, and then right at this point in time, kind of pinch and hold these together. I might even come back a little bit further. Pinch and hold these together. Now I'm simply going to just kind of take my line now that's the leftover, and I'm going to start wrapping that around. And I want it to just come right down this rod. And I'm just going to keep doing that, you know, within reason. I'm just spinning the rod as I go until I get down near the end of my line. And this is a great way to kind of do handles on rods and all that kind of stuff, yeah? And you might have noticed this is increasingly looking more and more like a fishing rod. And that's because it can be used as one. So in one of the next videos I do, I'll show that this is kind of the first half of a fishing rod. And like I say, this entire process is only about 10 minutes worth of Ropecraft to do. But in this video, I'll show you kind of how I'm doing all this binding up and that kind of thing. And then in the next video, I'll show kind of turning it more into functional equipment. But like I say, all I'm doing here is simply just wrapping around that, you know, stick, the rod, if you will, and coming down to the end. I'm doing this in this example to be all temporary. At the end of this video, I'm going to show you that we can just disassemble this and reclaim all this cordage if you wanted to use it for something else in the field. This is about the equivalent length of a short ridgeline, to give you an idea. For people in the bushcraft community, they would typically be carrying a piece of cordage like this, 25-30 foot long, to string up between two trees. This would be common gear that you'd have in your bag. But now I'm getting down to where that eyelet is. I want to just take a bite in the line and feed that through, and I don't want to pull the whole thing through. I just want to get it to the point where there's tension. Now I'm going to take this set and pull it towards me and apply tension. And it takes a bit of kind of muscling down the line, but in essence I'm wanting to just pull this all right down to where that loop was sitting down here from everything we just wrapped around. And by doing this, it does twofold things. It locks this more permanently, this cordage more permanently to sorry, the reason why I'm having a bit of difficulty is I didn't shave down the nubs on the bamboo. So the bamboo's got some resistance points here that are a little more that was just me being lazy, to be honest, but such is life, right? But that's the thinking, really, is I'm just going to want to walk all of that down. And you can see once it gets going, it all goes pretty easy. And as I'm pulling towards, pulling these bits towards me, this line along the rod, the binding rod, is getting tighter and tighter. So I don't want to do this all permanent, but I do want it to be kind of locked and solid. And that's exactly what I'm doing in this context. See, I've got a bit of loose here, and I'm okay with that. But you just keep walking it down until everything's kind of set in place. And that makes it that everything's kind of locked and holding. It's not going anywhere. I mean, I've left it as this because I'm going to quick release it now at the end of the video and show you. But I'll step back now and kind of just shift the camera angles and show you that this is rapidly looking more and more like a fishing rod with a handle, yeah? So I'll just shift my camera angles and show you that. Like I said, I did a bit of kind of loose fitting here. I'd bind this down really firmly if I wanted this to be permanent. I just don't want this to be permanent, so I'm putting it on enough where it's holding the tension on here and it's going to not go anywhere. But I don't want it to be like I can never get this thing off because I've just put it on too hard. Hopefully that makes sense. So like I say, I'll shift it and pretty it up a little bit here, just because that nub is causing me a bit of grief in the bamboo. But that's okay. Such is life, right? I'll just roll that out. And keep pressing that down. Like I say, that's kind of locked in now where it's not rock solid, but definitely makes a more comfortable handle. So I'll just stop and shift camera angles here. I don't even know if I need to stop, to be honest. Maybe I can just pan you back a bit and show you. But you can see, get this kind of more comfortable handle now. And because all those little eyes are all lined up, this becomes more and more like a fishing rod. And like I say, if you took out the inner strands of the paracord and just pulled out some of the inner strands, you can use those. They're roughly 35-40 pound test. You could easily turn around and use this as a functioning bushcraft fishing rod. I'm going to do another video on that where I'll go off in great detail, but this can also be used for other things. So I'll stop and grab my modular Ropecraft system and just get this hung. So we can talk about some of the things I'd show in future example videos. But like I say, I don't want to go too far because I want to keep this video kind of short. But hopefully that covers all the basic fundamental knots of how to form these binding rods to use out in the field. And like I say, in future videos I'll do some robust examples right up to making these into full bed frames and all sorts of stuff, yeah? But one way or the other, I'll stop now and we'll move on to the next part of the video. Okay, so like I say, to further out my example, I've just grabbed some of my modular Ropecraft systems. Now, I've done full detailed videos on these in previous videos, so if you're interested in kind of these components, how I made them and how they work and all that kind of stuff, I've got a plethora of different videos talking about all my different modular Ropecraft systems. If you want to really advance your Ropecraft skills, I recommend going back and kind of watching those, because I use them heavily as part of my examples throughout my videos. But needless to say, I've grabbed a couple of these just so I can do off an example here that's kind of a little more show and tell with these binding rods. And one of the good parts about my modular Ropecraft systems and these binding rods is they're intercompatible with each other. I can use them interoperably. That's one of the real gains of kind of using this kind of technology. It allows me to use all my stuff without, you know, without having any issues of compatibility with my gear. It's more the thinking of what I'm doing than anything else. So like I say, I'm just going to use some of the modular Ropecraft systems to kind of get this strung up between 2 points, and that way I've got this binding rod up and off the ground, and it's up hanging in the air, if you will, yeah? Okay, so and for people that have never seen modular Ropecraft systems before and have no idea what the hell he's talking about, so there's a loop in the line, and then there's 4 knots along the line. There's a clear space, we've got 4 knots, and then a loop on the other side. And I use these to rapidly connect and bind and apply tension to rope without having to tie any knots when I'm out in the field. So I'm just going to simply bind up to my fence here, where I've got the loop on the end. I'm going to feed the end of itself through, just apply tension. That allows me to lash onto that fence now. As you can see, I've got the other end here. Now, with this end, I'm just going to take the binding rod now, and I'm simply just setting it on here, just as the example. I could turn around and do more of a lark's head, where I take this knot, well, it's not even a lark's head, I take this knot, I bring it up, hook it into a space on the others, and then allow it to apply tension and that kind of stuff, and I'm locked on that way as well. But like I say, for this example, I just wanted to get the stick floating in the air. So hopefully you guys can see that on the camera angle, where the stick is now kind of being held up. Now, I could do this exact same fast lashing business. I could do this between 2 trees that were relatively close together, you know, and other things. And I've done the other side already. And what it allows is, I'll just step the camera back. And what it allows is, I now have that rod where it's just floating. And like I say, I could do that, you know, in this example, I'm just doing it, binding it up to the corner of my fence, but this could easily be lashed up between 2 trees and that kind of stuff, where I now have my binding rod to whatever height I want it at, yeah? And I might even adjust the height to bring it more up close so that the camera gets better camera angles. I'll probably do that and then cut back, yeah? All right, so I adjusted my binding rod up a little higher just by tweaking my modular Ropecraft systems on both ends. And if, like I said, if you watch previous videos about that, you know how elementary it is for me to make the modular Ropecraft systems adjustable and that kind of stuff. But now, say I want to use this binding rod to hook in gear. Now, I've showed in previous videos where I've used my modular Ropecraft systems to string up between trees and that kind of stuff, but this allows me to get the same kind of functionality. And in fact, I get a bit more strength to it because of the rigidity of the rod, the stick. But I want to set up a gear hang. So the reason why this kind of becomes handy if you already own pre-existing modular Ropecraft systems is, you can see I'm emulating my modular Ropecraft system just with a 20-30 foot piece of cordage here. And like I say, at the end of the video we'll reclaim that back, but it allows me to free up my modular Ropecraft systems, still have the functionality around camp that I would, you know, with my modular Ropecraft system components, but binding rods allow me to do a lot of the stuff like I'm trying to show in this video, yeah? So I've just got a strip of cordage here and nothing to it. I'm just going to take both ends. I'm just going to kind of hold them in my hand as such. I'm going to wrap them around my finger. I'm going to just pop my finger out of there. Then I'm going to take the other end and just feed it through, and just do a little overhand knot here, if you will, and just create a loop in the line. So pretty elementary, there's not much to this. Now when it comes to, got just an old school saw from back in the day that I'm going to use to bind up to this rod to show as part of the example. So I'm just going to feed my paracord through, grab it by itself there, and pull it through on that side so that the paracord is now bound to that saw. Hopefully that was all clear to you. Like I say, pretty elementary. I'll go through it one more time. I'm just taking my loop of cordage now, feeding it through the hole. I'm bringing it in enough where I can grab the other side, pull it through, and then pull back. And it just allows me to set, yeah? And now that's how I can kind of bind up to my saw and stuff. And now when it comes to hooking my saw up to this binding rod, it's really just as simple as I can come up to the binding rod, I feed the knot through that hole, feed my saw around, and now my saw is now bound up to this binding rod. And because the binding rod has the rigidity of the bamboo, it allows me to carry a significant amount of weight here, where I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I've just got a bottle. I had to rip the label off, so I had to stop and rip the label off. But needless to say, I can turn around and take this now. I can do the exact same thing, and I can go either direction. I can hook this on first and just set that onto the binding rod, so I've got an extended loop part. And now this, I can just roll like I did earlier, the lark said. Put that over top at the top of the water bottle and just allow it to apply some tension. And that's locked on now too. And you can see, because the binding rod has that rigidity to it, it allows me to carry weight. And now I can stack these one on top of the other in between two trees or two stands, or it's very flexible in that regard. But it allows me to do these kind of complex hangs with gear, and I can do far more with these binding rods than just this example. But I just wanted to show some example in this video because I know the how-to is pretty elementary, right? But hopefully it gives you an idea of the kind of functionality of, yeah, you can whip together, you know, fishing rods. Yes, you can turn around and do things like this where I've got hangs to get up off the ground, so everything's not just sitting down in the dirt. And like I say, when it comes to getting this stuff off, it's really elementary, right? I mean, I just pull that, loosen it, and I'm off, and I'm back to having my water bottle, right? So it just allows me to kind of have this level of get off the dirt functionality, if you will, that is really flexible. And it frees up my modular Ropecraft systems because they normally take a bit more to build, and it just allows me to have multi-functioning to just a piece of paracord that I have in the field. So I'm going to stop though. Like I say, I don't want to get too example rich in this video. I just wanted to show you one or two to give you a taste of the kind of functionality these binding rods can have. And I'll stop now, I'll shift camera angles, and I'll show you how easy it is to reclaim your cordage back off of this entire system, yeah? And just as a quick show for people that haven't seen the modular Ropecraft systems that much and they don't really know how they work, I'll show you how quick it is to detach from this fence, right? I'm off. This rod's reclaimed. It's just that easy. And yet it was able to turn around and sustain weight. As you can see, I was carrying the saw, the water and stuff, and I'm back down to having my modular Ropecraft systems back off of the, you know, object that I was hitching to. But like I say, there's whole detailed videos on my modular Ropecraft systems if you want to see those. I highly recommend going back and watching those if you want to do a lot of rapid stuff when you're out in the field without having to tie any knots. But like I say, we'll get back to this binding rod now and show you how easy it is to disassemble all of that and get it back down to just having your base cordage at the end, yeah? So like I say, there's lots of other examples I can show you, and I'll break that off into separate videos. And like I say, I know we were very close to having a completed fishing rod here, you know, within reason, but I plan on doing a separate video on that to show kind of next steps and a full build out of doing a fishing rod in this regard, yeah. But like I said earlier, I set this where there was only a bite in the line because I wanted to have this be temporary, yeah. So I can give that a pull back this way, and then that bite that's in the line here, I can just pull that back out and the whole thing starts to unravel. And this is one of the good parts about doing this kind of design. Like I say, you can do it even if you permanently set it and stuff. You can come back to having it like this easy enough. But just kind of show now when it comes to these knots, or these eyelets, I mean. So if you pull on this side, you can just pull them and then they come loose and they're done. I'll come in and show a close-up on that and show you how fast you can kind of walk through this. You know, I'll show a close-up and then I'll pan back and show you how fast you can walk through just reclaiming your cordage. Yeah, like I say, let me shift camera angles. So like I say, I'll try to show this up close as much as possible. So you can see these are locked. I can pull either direction. It's not going anywhere, right? But now when I want to rip this all apart again, you'll see on the back, I just kind of pull here, and it doesn't matter how tight they are, they just come loose. And I can just pull that loop back out, the eyelet's out, and the whole knot just falls apart. And then I step up to the next one. Just pull it, and it falls apart. And you can just literally walk down the rod doing the exact same thing over and over again. And it just falls all apart. And I'm not even pulling that hard. But if you know, if you're pulling on this side, it's locked, it's solid. I can apply a ton of weight and pressure, and it's not going anywhere. Like I say, I'll shift camera angles back and just walk through the rest of it and just clear my cordage back off. Yeah. So you can see I'm down to the last 4, yeah. And it's so rapid, it's ridiculous. Like I say, just pull them out. Pull them out. And that last one I pop off. I'm 100% free from the stick now. Like I say, I was only using, just set the stick to the side, I was only using 20-25 foot of cordage. I didn't even measure it out. I just know it's roughly about that. And I still had lots spare in that handle and stuff. I mean, if I was wanting to do a good job and that kind of stuff. But either way, I'll hank this back up now. I set the eye that I tied, and for people that don't know how I do those, I'll just do a quick example on the other side. I simply just take a bite in the line, pinch it together, and exactly like I did with the yellow paracord earlier, I just wrap it around my finger and feed it through as such. Apply tension. I've got the eye in my line, yeah. I don't want to leave the eye in this side, but just to show the example to make sure I covered every single knot there was in the video. But I tend to have cordage like this with an eye on them. It's bulk fairer when it comes to like bushcraft and all that stuff, yeah. But I'm going to put the eye to the back of my hand, and then I'm just going to wrap it figure 8 style over my thumb and my pinky on the inside. Get caught on the table. Classic, happens every time I'm doing a video. And when I get down to having 2 or 3 feet, I just slide my pinky out, kind of pinch the bundle together, turn it sideways, and then begin to roll it this way. And this is my rapid release bundles. I've shown this in tons of videos in the past. And then I just take my line now, I just take a little bite and stick it in underneath the previous 1 or 2. And then just give it a little tug so that it's under a bit of tension. Just leave it like that. And now this is quick release. When I want to use this, I can just grab this eye, pull, and it won't tangle up in a pile of knots, yeah? But either way, you can see I'm back to having my paracord unchanged from when I started the video, and just back down to having a stick. So, you know, hopefully you guys like these binding bars. You know, I find them to be useful in the field. They can do a lot of functioning things. You can build hangs and those types of things. You can also do fishing rods. You can take this right up and scale this up, and I'll show this probably in a future video of being able to do beds between trees, almost like you would a hammock, but it's definitely variant than that, and it allows me to do it with a lot less cordage than I would if I was using my modular Ropecraft systems. And generally speaking, I want to keep those modular Ropecraft systems free and available for other things like tripods and bag hangs and other stuff that I've shown in previous videos. But if you enjoy this type of content, please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching, yeah? Cheers.